Welcome to Creative Writing Corner. I'm your host, author, and creative writing coach, Luke J. Morris, and today I am introducing the idea of archetypes. Archetypes were first systematized by psychoanalyst Carl Jung. Jung used them to examine the way people related to each other and society as a whole, the roles we play in that society. But he also saw them as aspects of the human soul. All of us contain all of the archetypes within ourselves, even if we only express one or two of those archetypes outwardly. Joseph Campbell plugged the idea of archetypes into his monomyth, his universal hero's journey model of telling stories. For Campbell, every archetype appears in myths across centuries, continents, and cultures, each one filling its role in a similar structure of story, regardless of the community which gave rise to the myth. He connected this as well to Jung's collective unconscious theory. So every culture in the world shares the same unconscious pool of collective memories and resources, and that kind of leads to the monomyth. They're directly connected to each other. Campbell was influenced by Jung. I don't think it was the other way around. But I'm not here to debate psychoanalysts or the factual truth of the monomyth. It's been challenged, I get that. Instead, I'm just going to show how you, as a writer, can use these archetypes to fully realize your characters, to bring them to life, and improve your story. And possibly, thinking about these archetypes, keeping them in mind as you write, and especially as you plan, will help make your writing a little easier as well. So, I'm not going to pull up the works of Jung and Campbell. By all means, go read those if you get the chance. I'm not going to try to translate them into storyteller's language for you, though. I don't need to do that because Christopher Vogler has already done that for me. The Writer's Journey. This is my required text for my creative writing class this year. I don't always use a required text, as I like to give my students a variety of readings addressing different parts of the writing process throughout the year. But this book, right here, is so fundamental to storytelling in general and to story structure in particular that I wanted to give it a shot, and I think it's paid off. My kids can now recognize the archetypes and the stages of the hero's journey in many of the books they read and the movies and TV shows they watch, and they're beginning to incorporate those ideas of structure and characterization into their own writing, which means they're telling better stories. So today I'm going to give a brief overview of what the archetypes are. I already kind of explained it, but I'll talk about it a little bit more, and then I'm going to talk you through the most crucial archetype around whom all the others revolve, the hero. And that's because the hero is the archetype at the center of all of us. Everyone is the hero of his or her own story. Everyone is the hero of their own story. We are all the heroes of our own stories. It doesn't matter if we're side characters in someone else's plot, if we're the villain in someone else's story. It doesn't matter because for us, we are the heroes. And this is a good way to think about your own characters. Each one has a bit of the hero in him or her. Without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, so we have here The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler, Mythic Structure for Writers, 3rd edition. That's the text I teach from. Christopher Vogler himself, he's a screenplay and story development executive. He's worked for Disney, Warner Brothers, Fox, and many other major studios and production companies. He's the president of Storytech Literary Consulting, founded in 1999. He's the screenwriter of Jester Till, which was produced overseas, over in Europe, I believe, in 2003. He's a story contributor to The Lion King, 1994, the original, the good one. The Thin Red Line, which was nominated for a Best Picture Academy Award in 1998, and Fight Club. If you don't know Fight Club, don't talk about Fight Club. Quote here, Vogler conjures up ancient tools and teaches readers how to wield them, unlocking solutions to every story problem. Ignore the typos, please. That's from Darren Aronofsky. If you guys are film fans, you probably know who he is. He's directed some of the trippiest movies ever made, including Pi. It's one of my personal favorites from 1998. That was his first. Requiem for a Dream, the feel-bad movie of the century. The Fountain, it's confusing. Black Swan, depressing and confusing. And The Wrestler, which was also an Academy Award winner, won Mickey Rourke, I believe, his first Academy Award. So, obviously, a very well-known, very well-respected director is only one of many highly regarded people in Hollywood who give Vogler all the props. He is the Lion King in and of himself. So, you get the ethos of this guy. You get where he's coming from. You know, he knows story. Whether or not he's a writer, quote unquote, he knows story. So talk about mapping the journey. This is part 1, or book 1 of the book. He lays out the hero's journey, and here up top, we've got the external hero's journey. And down at the bottom, we have what we call the character arc. I'm going to talk about character arc to a greater extent later on. I'll talk about the hero's journey step by step later on as well. The character arc is one of the most crucial things in storytelling. It is the fundamental inner journey of the character as he changes and grows, or in the case of a negative arc like Breaking Bad, declines throughout the story as the story goes on, as he passes each point on the external hero's journey. So the archetypes. What is an archetype? Again, it's not a stereotype or a formula for a character. It's not just a cookie-cutter model that you can fill something in and there have your character all fleshed out for you. Per Vogler, if you grasp the function of the archetype which a particular character is expressing, it can help you determine if the character is pulling her full weight in the story. In other words, is the character doing enough? Is the character active enough? Is the character important enough in the story to remain in the story? Because otherwise you don't need the character there. Move on. Some different ways to look at archetypes. One way is as functions within the story. Vogler says, I encountered another way of looking at archetypes, not as rigid character roles, but as functions performed temporarily by characters to achieve certain effects in a story. In other words, just because a character embodies a given archetype at a given time, just because a character might be a mentor at one point, let's say, that does not mean that that character needs to be that role, needs to fulfill that archetype the entire story. The mentor may become an ally, and then later on may become a shadow or an enemy. So these are all different possibilities, but the functions themselves stay relatively the same. The archetypes, in this sense, again per Vogler, can be thought of as masks worn by the characters temporarily as they are needed to advance the story. As facets of the hero's personality. Per Vogler, a hero sometimes proceeds through the story, gathering and incorporating the energy and traits of the other characters. She learns from the other characters, fusing them into a complete human being who has picked up something from everyone she has met along the way. They're parts of the hero's personality that the hero is picking up as they go. Another way to look at facets is as emanations of the hero. So instead of bits of personality and character that the hero collects on his way, they're more parts of the personality that the hero expresses and brings to life as he goes through. So every bit of the hero exists in every kind of archetype. How do you view the archetypes, and how can you use them to create characters for your stories? The two questions that are most useful, according to Vogler, for figuring out what the nature of a certain archetype is what psychological function or part of the personality does it represent? And 2, what is its dramatic function in the story? So keep these questions in mind, and we are going to delve into the hero. So here we have a whole bunch of archetypes. We've got the hero, who's got strength, courage, stamina, faith, competing against great odds, with challenges being arrogance and delusions of grandeur. It depends on what kind of hero it is, but yeah, that is often the case. That is often an issue. Everything from the sage, who might usually be the mentor character, the innocent, the lover. These are certain Jungian or quasi-Jungian archetypes. Citizen, sovereign, explorer, jester. We will talk later on about the trickster, who's kind of a jester type. The rebel, the magician. Magician might also fit into sage or mentor there. We don't have a whole lot of the negative archetypes here, the shadow archetype that we'll talk about. There are so many other ways of looking at this. Again, we've got a hero, we've got the magician, the sage, the explorer. So we move from mastery over to independence, from Superman to James Kirk, all the way down here past Tom Hanks and Big to the Godfather as the ruler of stability. Moving back up here past the horrifying Mike Myers to the regular guy or gal, which as always would be played by Sandra Bullock. We pass Willy Wonka and Dirty Harry on our way back up to the hero. So from mastery to independence to stability to belonging, these are the circles of potential heroes you might have, potential characters you might follow in a given story. The hero himself. According to Vogler, each person hearing a tale or watching a play or movie is invited in the early stages of the story to identify with the hero, to merge with him and see the world of the story through his eyes. So what does it mean to identify with the hero? How can the writer make this happen for the audience? Think about that. How can you make your audience identify with the hero, particularly if your hero is not easily identifiable? If your hero is a hobbit, let's say, or a serial killer, let's say, it might be hard for the audience to identify with that person. So what you need to do is you need to make the person feel real within his own world. What writers want to do, what storytellers want to do when they're creating an identifiable hero is to give their heroes a combination of qualities that we can all identify with, that we recognize in ourselves. So it doesn't necessarily have to be ultimate charity or self-sacrifice or selflessness. As a matter of fact, though we hopefully recognize those traits a little bit in ourselves, if you have a hero who is wholly good, wholly self-sacrificing, wholly perfect in every way, it tends to be a really boring hero, and the rest of the story better be interesting to make it worthwhile. Most of the time, though, your hero should have identifiable qualities. They should have desires to be loved and understood, desires to succeed. They should want to survive, to be free, to get revenge, to right wrongs, to express themselves, to be heard, to be respected, or to get everything they want for no effort. We all kind of want that, even though none of us deserve it. It's just a natural part of human nature. According to Vogler, stories invite us to invest part of our personal identity in the hero for the duration of the experience. In a sense, we become the hero for a while. We project ourselves into the hero's psyche and see the world through her eyes. Heroes need some admirable qualities so that we want to be like them. We want to experience the self-confidence of Katharine Hepburn, the elegance of Fred Astaire, the wit of Cary Grant, the sexiness of Marilyn Monroe. Heroes should have universal qualities, emotions, and motivations that everyone has experienced at one time or another. Revenge, anger, lust, competition, territoriality, patriotism, idealism, cynicism, or despair. But heroes must also be unique human beings rather than stereotypical creatures or tin gods without flaws or unpredictability. So your hero has to be flawed. You probably know this already, but I'm going to reiterate this. If your hero is one complete flaw, people aren't going to identify with him and they're not going to want to be like him. So it's going to be harder for readers or audience members to follow along with a hero like that. However, if the hero is perfect and an absolute saint, it's going to be really hard for audience members to identify with that hero. They may like him, but they're probably not going to be that interested in what he does. So you have to create a hero with admirable qualities, but also with flaws, with room to grow, because that's what a story is. It's about personal growth, and we want to see someone grow. We want to identify with that person who is growing, the hero, so that we can grow with him through his story. That's what story is all about. So who's easier to identify with? A character with contradictory drives, or a character with single-minded motivation and purpose? You may say the single-minded character since it's simpler. However, That's definitely not the case, because how many people do you know who are completely single-minded in their motivation and their drives and their purposes? I can't think of a single person like that. I can think of people who are more or less like that, but I can't think of a single person who doesn't have a single drive that contradicts some of his other drives. We all have contradictory drives. We all, I don't want to universalize for everybody, but many people want to find love and connection with a single individual. Many people want a loving monogamous relationship. At the same time, most of us get attracted to a whole bunch of different people. We have to figure out how to reconcile the two. Same with your characters. Your character has to have those contradictory drives in himself or herself in order to be relatable, in order for us to want to follow along, in order for us to be interested and be able to identify. Some other dramatic functions of the hero. What can you think of? As I said, heroes overcome obstacles and achieve goals, but they also gain new knowledge and wisdom. So growth is a dramatic function of the hero. Action is a dramatic function of the hero. The hero should perform the decisive action of the story, the action that requires taking the most risk or responsibility. So if we're following a private in the army, but ultimately it's the general who makes the major decision and takes the most risk, we're following the wrong character. If we're following the general, but ultimately it's the private who sacrifices himself to save the general's life, we probably should have been following the private story. Sacrifice, that brings up sacrifice. The true mark of a hero is the hero's willingness to give up something of value, perhaps even her own life, on behalf of an ideal or group. Other functions, dealing with death. Heroes show us how to deal with death. They can survive it, proving that death isn't so tough, or they may die, or perhaps only symbolically, and be reborn, proving that death can be transcended. The most effective heroes are those who experience sacrifice. Every hero must give up something to gain something greater. That's the whole purpose of growth and change, right? Giving up something to gain something greater. And sometimes that something greater is a lesson. It turns out what they gave up in order to get what they wanted, it wasn't worth giving that up to get what they wanted. So there are lessons to be learned there. You see heroism, you see heroic actions in other archetypes. Other archetypes for a little while can be the hero of the story. Many times you get a character like Brer Rabbit or Roger Rabbit or Bugs Bunny. I don't know why it's always a rabbit, but the trickster hero, the hero of the story, starts out as a trickster archetype, a Loki kind of character, if you will. Many times the mentor can temporarily take the place of the hero, like when, spoilers for the very first Star Wars film, when Obi-Wan Kenobi sacrifices himself so that Luke and the others can escape. That is taking a heroic action. He is adopting the heroic archetype, even though most of the time Obi-Wan Kenobi fits the mentor archetype. Vogler says, and I agree with this absolutely, ideally every well-rounded character should manifest a touch of every archetype, because the archetypes are expressions of the parts that make up a complete personality. That gives you the functions of the hero. And, of course, a hero, as I talked about before, a hero has to have flaws. Flaws humanize a character and give a character somewhere to go, room for growth. That's the very point of a hero, of following a character, is to see that growth. Now, can a hero have a flat arc or have no arc? Yes, it's possible. Characters like Superman. Superman very rarely has a broad-ranging or deep character arc. There are a few things he might need to learn along the way, but most of the time, he's changing the world, and it's the change of everyone else around him. Him changing the world that is the story. Same with Captain America, if we're all going for the Marvel style. Captain America's a little more human because he's got flaws and foibles just because of the fact that he is human. He is a lot more vulnerable than Superman. But Captain America also has this strict moral character that does not break, does not bend. And it is the way that he changes the world around him, the way that he changes the other heroes he interacts with, the way that he changes the villains or affects the villains. There's a baby screaming nearby. Goodness. Not my baby this time. But anyway, the hero himself ideally will be flawed. Will have something, some room to grow, somewhere to go with the story. Sometimes it may be a deficiency in character. Sometimes it may be that they're just missing a romantic partner or a friend. Or it could be that they experience a loss, and the hero has to somehow recover from this loss and learn from it and grow from that. In modern stories, it's the hero's personality that is being recreated or restored to wholeness. So that's what Vogler is pointing out. Most of the time, in modern stories, we're seeing the hero recover if he starts out damaged, if he starts out as a guy with a problem. What are some varieties of hero, and how do we differentiate them? According to Vogler, heroes are of two types. Willing, active, gung-ho, committed to the adventure without doubts, always bravely going ahead, self-motivated. Or, two, unwilling, full of doubts and hesitations, passive, needing to be motivated or pushed into the adventure by outside forces. Both make equally entertaining stories, although a hero who is passive throughout may make for an uninvolving dramatic experience. It's usually best for an unwilling hero to change at some point, to become committed to the adventure after some necessary motivation has been supplied. I would say that's probably the best way to go about creating a hero. It is not the only way, and you do not have to do it by any means. Your story may be better if you go another direction. But for your hero to become committed and move toward action, but not to start out as the go-getter hero who's going to accomplish everything, because if they're already that, then you know it's very unlikely that they're going to lose, unless you really give them a hard setback that makes them question everything they know. If you do start a character out as a go-getter, then you're going to have to do something to interrupt that and make him recover who he is. Otherwise, you start a character out as not a go-getter who becomes a go-getter in order to accomplish what he needs to for the story. Some varieties of hero here. You've got Luke Skywalker, who's dealing with deep angst in Return of the Jedi at this point. I can tell it's Return of the Jedi because of his hand. Harry Potter. This is one of the later films, the later books. I don't remember which one, but he's probably here facing off against the Death Eater or Voldemort or maybe just Snape. Who knows? Katniss Everdeen, Frodo Baggins, Coraline herself, and Neo from The Matrix. All of these fit the hero archetype. Let's examine the hero. The hero's archetype, or the hero archetype, represents the ego's search for identity and wholeness, Vogler says. So your first writing assignment is to write about an experience you've had that forced you to grow. What did you have to go through, and what did you have to do to become a stronger, smarter, / more caring person? You are the hero in this writing assignment. So just brainstorm. What did you have to do to make yourself become a hero or become heroic or act heroically? You don't have to save the world. You don't have to have saved anyone's life. If you did, that's great. But if not, there are plenty of ways where if you just knuckled up and passed a class you thought you were going to fail, that was a heroic act. What did you have to go through to do that, and how did it improve you as a person? What did you learn about yourself and about the world by doing that? Heroes are symbols of the soul and transformation, and of the journey each person takes through life. So your second writing assignment, if you do that first one, and you want to keep going, you want to really apply it to your fiction, script a scene, or write a scene, however you want to do it. You can script, that's for screenwriting, but just writing a scene for fiction is fine too. Introducing a hero of your own invention. Figure out how you're going to make that character relatable, likable, and interesting. Now, that character does not have to be likable, but it's a good idea if there's something to like about him. If it's a completely unlikable character, it's hard to make your audience invested. Even Walter White has his likable points, and that's part of the reason that we follow along in Breaking Bad. So how will you make that character relatable, likable, and interesting while still leaving room for growth, action, sacrifice, and character flaws? You probably want to introduce your character in action, like dealing with a problem or interacting with someone. If you introduce your character doing nothing, it tells us pretty much nothing about the character, unless it is a true character note, like the Big Lebowski is introduced to us when he's shopping for milk in his bathrobe. That shows us that he is a character who likes to do nothing. But the moment he returns home, something happens to him. And so that's the kind of character that we get from that. He's another one with a flat arc, by the way, but the world itself does change around him. So we'll talk about those flat arcs and those rounded character arcs and those more extreme character arcs later on. But right now, just try to get your hero down. Get an idea of what kind of hero you could develop. So think about yourself as a hero first, and then try to adapt that kind of experience to see what kind of struggles your fictional hero could go through. And that's all I have for the hero's journey and Christopher Vogler at this point. I know, it's a lot. But I think you guys are very capable of applying this knowledge and using it to become better writers. So thanks for tuning into Creative Writing Corner. I've been Luke J. Morris, and you should now have an idea of your hero, and I hope that helps you to flesh him out and to give you an inspiration for a story to tell. Until next time, my friend, create your characters and write like the world depends on it. Because it does. Hey there, fellow writer. Thanks for tuning in to Creative Writing Corner. I hope you got something valuable or at least ridiculous out of this episode. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel for more great writing tips and tricks, and if you have any writing questions, suggestions, or topics you'd like me to discuss, leave them in the comments below. Thanks again, my friend. Until next time, keep the words flowing.